Welcome to another edition of Tuesdays with Liz, a disability policy for all. Today I'm very excited to be talking with Finn Gardiner, who is the Boston Community Coordinator and Chapter Leader for the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. Today we are going to talk with him about his work on the Autism database in Massachusetts that he did with the Eunice Kennedy Shriver Center, which is, as you said, in Massachusetts. So welcome, Finn.
Hi Liz, I'm glad to be here.
Can you tell us about the autism database and why is it important?
So, the database in Massachusetts doesn't actually exist yet, but it was recommended by the Special Commission relative to autism to the state government to create an integrated database of autistic people in Massachusetts. And the reason why this kind of database is important is that it would collect information on autistic people about their diagnoses, about their health needs, about the services they receive. And the idea is that doctors, teachers, professors, and other people involved in autistic people's lives would be able to access data that would allow them to help people more effectively. Unfortunately, there are also privacy concerns about this kind of database. For example, people might be worried that the police might have access to this data, or that people that they would feel uncomfortable with having this information would have this information. And so my work with ASAN, who was contracted by the Shriver Center to help do this work, was to work as a self-advocate, talking to other self-advocates and professionals and parents about helping gauge their attitudes about the creation of this database, to see what community members' reactions might be to its creation.
That's so interesting and so needed. The next question is, what is the citizen jury?
So the citizens jury was the method that we and the Shriver Center and the Human Services Research Institute used to find out what stakeholders thought about this proposed database. So we used a survey to recruit people to go to this citizens jury, which is sort of this event where people get together and listen to expert witnesses. These expert witnesses are people with experience, working in Massachusetts state policy or autism databases in other states or countries, and people with familiarity with other disability policy or data collection. And so we had a group of, about almost 20 people get together and listen to these witnesses, and then they would sit together and talk and sort of weigh the pros and cons of everything that was discussed. And then finally, after a series of two initial in-person meetings, and then a moderated online group in the middle, and then the final citizens jury meeting, people got together and came up with a series of policy recommendations. So the citizens jury is a form of participatory action research. It's a form of citizen engagement that gets people together to seriously look at a set of ideas that could affect policy that affects them, and come up with some thoughtful ideas that are based on that thinking, based on that exposure to these ideas. So it's a great process.
So it sounds like a regular jury.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, we call them citizen jurors, and they got, obviously, the idea was on trial, not a person, but they were, had the expert witnesses come in, and they would talk about, for example, an autism database in New Jersey, or a proposed database with biological information in Ireland, or the situation in Massachusetts disability policy, or the pros and cons of creating an autism database and ethical issues behind that. So there were a wide variety of voices, and people had to weigh them.
That's really interesting. The next question is, how were self-advocates involved in forming this database?
Okay, so as I said before, the database doesn't exist yet, but a large portion, about half our citizen jurors were self-advocates, and I was on the team as a self-advocate. Shriver and HSRI made sure that they had self-advocate representation from the very beginning, so they had ASAN come in to help them on this project, and that's how I got involved. And when we worked on recruitment, we made sure that we had questions that included self-advocates as opposed to just parents or just professionals. And we ended up with, as I said, like half the participants there were self-advocates, and they were all very vocal about what they wanted to see in the database. And they were, we made sure that this was very much rooted in the idea of nothing about us without us. And so self-advocates were a part of the decision-making. That we had self-advocates on the advisory board, we had them in the jury, I was helping the team do recruitment and, putting together the survey and facilitating the citizens jury itself.
So, if this is an autism database where all the self-advocates, people with autism, or people with other kinds of disabilities?
This was specifically about autism, so, they wouldn't have people with, like, Down syndrome or ADHD in there.
Okay. Thanks.
Unless they were also autistic.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
And the next question, and the last question, is how will the work of the Shriver Center benefit people with disabilities?
Well, Shriver's work is very much rooted in inclusion and social acceptance of people with disabilities and fostering the understanding of what intellectual and developmental disabilities are and how they affect people. And so through this project, I think that Shriver did a good job of emphasizing the importance of self-advocate input in creating policy that will affect us.
Okay, thank you. And if you have any questions about this or any other policy issues, please go to the AUCD webpage and look for this week's In Brief. And if you have any questions or comments about this week's Tuesdays with Liz, please leave them in the space below. Thanks again, Finn.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.